The stagecoach wheel hit another rut in the dusty Colorado road, and Natalie Richardson pressed her gloved hand against the window frame to steady herself, watching the Rocky Mountains rise in the distance like jagged teeth against an impossibly blue September sky. She had traveled from Boston to Aspen with nothing but 2 trunks, a teaching certificate, and a letter of appointment that promised a new life far from the scandal that had driven her west in 1878. The other passengers, a mining engineer and his wife, had departed at the previous stop, leaving her alone for the final stretch into town, and she was grateful for the solitude to collect her thoughts before facing whatever awaited her in this rough mountain settlement. The stage driver called out that they would arrive within the hour, and Natalie smoothed her traveling dress, dark green wool that had seen better days but remained respectable enough for a schoolteacher. At 23, she had expected to be married by now, settled in some comfortable Boston townhouse with children and a garden. Instead, she had accepted Thomas Whitmore's lies about his circumstances, only to discover he had a wife already, and the resulting gossip had made her position at the girls' academy untenable. Colorado represented escape, a chance to rebuild where no one knew her shame. Aspen sprawled before her as they crested the final hill, a jumble of wooden buildings clustered along the roaring Fork River, with mining operations scarring the mountainsides beyond. The town had exploded in population over the past year with the discovery of rich silver deposits, and even from a distance, Natalie could see the chaos of rapid growth. Half-finished structures, muddy streets crowded with wagons, and what seemed like hundreds of men moving about their business. Her heart sank slightly. She had hoped for something quieter, more civilized, but beggars could not be choosers. The stage pulled up before the Grand Hotel, which looked neither grand nor particularly stable, and the driver helped her down while calling for someone to handle her trunks. Natalie stood on the wooden sidewalk, breathing in air that smelled of pine, wood smoke, and something else she could not quite identify, sharp and mineral from the mines. Several men paused in their activities to stare at her, and she lifted her chin, meeting their gazes with the prim expression that had served her well in Boston. "Miss Richardson." A woman's voice cut through the ambient noise, and Natalie turned to see a sturdy figure in practical brown calico approaching. "I'm Martha Hendricks, the mayor's wife. We've been expecting you. Mrs. Hendricks, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." Natalie extended her hand, relieved to find at least one friendly face. Martha's grip was firm, her face weathered but kind beneath a sensible bonnet. "The schoolhouse is ready for you, though I'll warn you it's nothing fancy. We've had trouble keeping teachers out here. Most don't last a month before they are on the next stage back to civilization." Her tone suggested this was a test of sorts. "I have no intention of leaving," Natalie said firmly. "I've come to stay. We'll see." Martha gestured to a young man lounging nearby. "Billy, help with Miss Richardson's trunks. We'll get you settled at the boarding house, and tomorrow I'll show you the school. You'll start Monday with 23 students aged 6 to 14. It's a handful, but you look capable enough." The boarding house proved to be a narrow 2-story structure run by a widow named Mrs. Cooper, who showed Natalie to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. An iron bedstead, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a single chair comprised the furnishings, but the window overlooked the mountains, and Natalie decided she could be content here. After Mrs. Cooper departed, she unpacked her belongings, hanging her 3 dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her books on the narrow shelf beside the bed. Teaching manuals, mostly, but also her treasured volumes of poetry and a novel or two for the long evenings ahead. That night, she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Aspen. Piano music from the saloons, men's voices raised in argument or laughter, the occasional gunshot that made her flinch despite Martha's assurance that such things were common and rarely meant anything serious. She thought of Boston, of her mother's tight-lipped disappointment and her father's refusal to even say goodbye. They had given her the money for passage west and made it clear she was no longer welcome in their home. The pain of that rejection still burned, but beneath it ran a thread of something else. Relief, perhaps, or the first stirring of freedom. Sunday morning brought church services in a building that doubled as a community hall, and Natalie attended in her best dress, a navy silk that was somewhat too fine for the rough congregation, but appropriate for meeting her future students and their families. She sat in the back, conscious of curious stares, and listened to a circuit preacher deliver a sermon about redemption that felt uncomfortably pointed given her circumstances. Afterward, Martha introduced her to what seemed like half the town, names and faces blurring together until Natalie's head spun. "And this is Adam Yates," Martha said, pulling forward a tall man who had been standing at the edge of the crowd. "He runs a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town." "Adam, this is Miss Richardson, our new teacher." Natalie looked up, and up further still, meeting eyes the color of honey in a face tanned dark by years of outdoor work. Adam Yates had to be well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that strained the seams of his Sunday coat and hands that looked more accustomed to hard labor than the gentle handshake he offered her. His dark hair was neatly combed but too long by Boston standards, curling slightly over his collar, and when he smiled, lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes. "Miss Richardson." His voice was deep and quiet, with a hint of something Southern softened by years elsewhere. "Welcome to Aspen. I hope you'll find it to your liking." "Thank you, Mr. Yates." She returned his handshake, surprised by the calluses on his palm and the careful way he moderated his grip, as though afraid of hurting her. "I'm certain I will." "Adam supplies beef to most of the restaurants and hotels in town," Martha continued. "He's one of our success stories. Came here with nothing 10 years ago and built that ranch from scratch." A faint flush darkened Adam's cheeks. Martha exaggerates. "I had a horse and enough stubbornness not to quit when things got difficult." He released Natalie's hand, and she found herself oddly reluctant to let go. "If you need anything out at the school, Miss Richardson, my ranch is close by. Don't hesitate to send word." "That's very kind." Natalie smiled, and something flickered in his expression before he nodded and moved away, making room for the next person waiting to meet her. Monday morning arrived with rain that turned Aspen's streets into rivers of mud, and Natalie picked her way carefully to the schoolhouse, holding her skirts high and trying not to ruin her boots. The building stood at the edge of town, a simple rectangular structure with a bell tower and windows along both sides. Inside, rough-hewn benches served as desks, a blackboard dominated one wall, and a pot-bellied stove squatted in the corner, currently cold. Her students arrived in clusters, tracking mud across the floor, eyeing her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. She took roll call from the list Martha had provided, matching names to faces. The older boys sat in the back, slouching and whispering among themselves, clearly expecting to intimidate her as they likely had previous teachers. The younger children fidgeted in the front rows, wide-eyed and uncertain. Natalie set down her attendance book and surveyed her domain. "Good morning. I am Miss Richardson, and I will be your teacher this year. I expect you to arrive on time, complete your assignments, and treat each other with respect. In return, I will do my best to make your education both useful and interesting." She let her gaze sweep across the room, pausing on the biggest of the older boys, a hulking youth who had to be close to 15. I understand some of you may doubt whether I can manage this classroom. I assure you I can, and any student who wishes to test that theory will find themselves answering to your parents and the mayor. Are we clear? The boy met her stare for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, madam. Excellent. Let's begin with arithmetic. The morning passed in a blur of lessons, correcting mistakes, and learning the capabilities of her various students. Some could barely write their names, while others, particularly the daughters of the more prosperous families, had clearly received instruction before. Natalie made mental notes about who needed extra help, who could be trusted to work independently, and which troublemakers to watch carefully. By noon, when she dismissed them for lunch, her head ached and her voice had gone hoarse from projecting over 23 children in various states of attention. She sat at her desk, eating the bread and cheese she had packed, looking out the window at the mountains. They dominated the landscape, beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, so different from the gentle hills around Boston. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Come in. Adam Yates ducked through the doorway, holding his hat in his hands. Miss Richardson. I hope I'm not disturbing your dinner. Not at all. She set down her bread, smoothing her hair self-consciously. What brings you to town, Mr. Yates? Had some business at the bank. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to ask if you'd had any trouble. I know the children can be rough on new teachers. Nothing I couldn't handle, but I appreciate your concern. She studied him, this tall rancher who seemed almost shy despite his size. Was there something else? He turned his hat in his hands, and she noticed again how large they were, scarred and calloused from ranch work. Martha mentioned you don't know how to ride. Is that true? Heat flooded Natalie's face. She had confided that detail to Martha in passing, never expecting it to be shared. I'm afraid so. In Boston, there was never any need. We had carriages and streetcars. Out here, it's different. The distances are greater, and come winter, the roads can be impassable. A horse might be the only way to get around. He met her eyes directly. I could teach you if you'd like. Nothing fancy, just enough to handle a steady mount. Natalie's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of revealing her incompetence to this capable man made her cringe, but practical considerations overrode her pride. He was right about the necessity of riding in this country, and who else would teach her? Martha probably assumed every adult possessed such basic skills. I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Yates, though I warn you, I'm likely to be a terrible student. His face relaxed into a smile. I doubt that. You managed those children this morning, which takes more courage than sitting on a horse. Would tonight after school suit you? I could bring a gentle mare. Tonight would be fine. I'll see you around 5 then. He settled his hat back on his head and nodded. Good day, Miss Richardson. After he left, Natalie sat for a moment, wondering what she had agreed to. The thought of climbing onto a horse terrified her. She had seen them, of course, but always from a safe distance, and they seemed like impossibly large, unpredictable creatures. Still, she had come west to start over, to become someone new. That person, she decided, would not be afraid of horses. The afternoon lessons went more smoothly than the morning, and by the time she dismissed her students at 4 o'clock, Natalie felt she might actually survive her first year of teaching. She tidied the schoolroom, prepared assignments for the next day, and changed into her oldest dress, a practical gray cotton that could withstand the rigors of a riding lesson. Promptly at 5, she heard hoofbeats outside. Adam had brought 2 horses, his own, a rangy bay gelding and a smaller chestnut mare with a white blaze on her forehead. He dismounted and approached Natalie where she stood on the schoolhouse steps, trying to look braver than she felt. "This is Rosie," he said, stroking the mare's neck. "She's 15 years old and the steadiest horse I own. She raised my nephews on her back before I bought her from my sister. You couldn't find a safer mount." Rosie turned her head to look at Natalie with large, liquid brown eyes that seemed gentle enough. Natalie descended the steps slowly, extending her hand as Adam had done. The mare snuffled at her palm, warm breath tickling her skin. "She's looking for treats," Adam explained. "Here." He pulled something from his pocket and placed it in Natalie's hand, an apple slice. "Hold your palm flat so she doesn't accidentally bite your fingers." Natalie offered the apple, marveling at the softness of the horse's lips as Rosie delicately took the treat. "She's beautiful. She's a good girl. Now, before we get you mounted, let me show you how to approach a horse safely." For the next 20 minutes, Adam demonstrated the basics: how to move around a horse without startling it, how to check the saddle and bridle, how to hold the reins. His voice remained patient and calm throughout, never condescending, treating her ignorance as a simple gap in knowledge rather than a character flaw. "Ready to get on?" he asked finally. Natalie swallowed hard. "I suppose." Adam positioned her on Rosie's left side, showing her where to place her foot in the stirrup and how to grip the saddle horn. "I'll help you up. Just step up with your left foot and swing your right leg over. I'll steady you." She tried, but her skirts tangled and she lost her balance, stumbling backward into Adam's chest. His hands caught her waist, holding her steady, and for a moment she was acutely aware of his warmth, his strength, the clean scent of soap and leather. "Sorry," she gasped. "Nothing to apologize for. Let's try again, and this time I'll give you a boost." On the second attempt, with Adam's assistance, she found herself sitting astride Rosie's broad back, higher off the ground than expected and feeling desperately insecure. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "There you go." Adam adjusted her stirrups, his movements quick and efficient. "Now, sitting up here probably feels strange, but I promise Rosie isn't going anywhere. Just relax and get used to the height." "Relax," Natalie repeated faintly. "Right." He showed her how to hold the reins, explained the basic commands, and then led Rosie forward at a gentle walk, circling the schoolyard while Natalie clung to the saddle horn with white knuckles. The mare's gait was smooth, rolling beneath her like a ship on calm seas, and gradually her death grip loosened as she realized she wasn't going to slide off and break her neck. "How does it feel?" Adam asked. "Terrifying, but also rather wonderful." She laughed shakily. "I'm actually on a horse." "You are indeed." His smile was warm with approval. "Want to try controlling her yourself?" "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Sure you are. Just gentle pressure on the reins to turn and a slight squeeze with your legs to go forward. She'll do most of the work." For the remainder of the lesson, Natalie practiced walking Rosie in circles and figure eights, with Adam jogging alongside offering encouragement and corrections. By the time the sun began sinking toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, she had managed several circuits of the schoolyard without his direct assistance, and pride warred with exhaustion in her chest. "That's enough for today," Adam said, catching Rosie's bridle. "You did well, Miss Richardson. Better than well, actually. I stayed on at least." She looked down at him, his face gilded by the sunset light. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. I know you must have far more important things to do than teach an incompetent Easterner how to ride." "Nothing more important," he said quietly. "And you're not incompetent. You just haven't had the opportunity to learn." He helped her dismount, hands spanning her waist as she slid down, and for a moment they stood very close, her hands braced against his shoulders for balance. "Same time tomorrow." His voice had gone slightly husky. "I'd like that very much." He stepped back, clearing his throat. "I'll see you then." "Good evening, Miss Richardson." "Good evening, Mr. Yates." She watched him ride away, leading Rosie behind his gelding until they disappeared around a bend in the road. Only then did she allow herself to examine the flutter of something unfamiliar in her stomach, the way her heart had raced when he touched her. Surely she was not so foolish as to develop feelings for the first kind man she met in Colorado, not after Thomas and the disaster in Boston. She was here to teach, to build a respectable life, not to lose her head over a rancher with kind eyes and patient hands. But as she walked back to the boarding house, Natalie could not quite suppress a smile. Over the following weeks, the riding lessons became the bright spot in Natalie's days. Teaching remained challenging, with discipline problems from the older boys and struggles to reach students at vastly different levels. But every evening when Adam arrived with Rosie, the tensions of the day evaporated. He was unfailingly patient, celebrating her small victories and brushing off her mistakes with quiet reassurance. Under his tutelage, she progressed from merely staying aboard at a walk to managing a trot, though the bouncing gait left her sore and breathless. "You're a natural," Adam said one evening in late September, watching her guide Rosie through a series of turns. "Another few weeks and you'll be ready to ride out to the ranch." "The ranch?" Natalie brought Rosie to a halt, the command feeling natural now. "Why would I go to your ranch?" "Well, you can't spend your whole life circling the schoolyard. You should see the country, ride the trails through the mountains. It's beautiful up there, especially now with the aspens turning gold." He paused. "If you'd like, that is. I don't mean to presume." The careful way he asked, as though afraid of overstepping, touched her. Over their hours together, she had learned small things about Adam Yates. He was 29, had come west from Missouri after his parents died, and had built his ranch through years of hard work and frugal living. He had no family nearby except the sister who lived in Denver, whose children occasionally visited. He loved the mountains, loved ranching, and seemed content with a simple life far from cities and society. He was also, she had come to realize, desperately lonely, though he would never admit it. "I'd love to see your ranch," she said. "Perhaps this Sunday after church." His face brightened. "Sunday would be perfect. I'll pack us a dinner and we can make a day of it." Sunday arrived clear and crisp, the air carrying the first real bite of approaching winter. Natalie dressed carefully in her riding habit, a dark blue ensemble that Martha had helped her acquire from a dressmaker in town. The split skirt still felt scandalous compared to her usual modest dresses, but it made riding infinitely easier. After church, Adam met her with both horses saddled, Rosie looking particularly sleek after what must have been a thorough grooming. "You look like a real Colorado woman now," he said approvingly as she mounted without assistance, something that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier. They rode north out of Aspen, following a wagon track that climbed gradually into the foothills. Around them, groves of aspen trees fluttered in the breeze, their leaves turned brilliant gold against the deep green of pine forests. The roaring Fork River ran alongside the trail, its rushing waters clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. Natalie found herself relaxing into Rosie's gait, no longer tensing against every movement, actually enjoying the ride. "Tell me about Boston," Adam said as they rode side by side. "I've never been further east than Kansas City." Natalie considered how to answer. The Boston she had known felt like a different world, one that no longer had any claim on her. "It's crowded and proper and everyone knows everyone else's business. The buildings are brick and stone, nothing like here. We had theaters and concerts, libraries and museums, all the culture you could want, but also rigid expectations about how people should behave, what was acceptable and what was not." "Is that why you left? The expectations?" She glanced at him, surprised by his perception. Partly. I made a mistake, trusted the wrong person, and suddenly I wasn't welcome anymore. It seemed easier to start fresh somewhere no one knew me. Their loss is our gain. He said it simply, without flattery, and somehow that made it more meaningful. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, climbing higher until they reached a plateau where a ranch house stood surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. The house was modest, a single story of weathered wood with a wide porch, but it looked solid and well maintained. Behind it, pastures stretched toward the mountains, dotted with grazing cattle. "This is it," Adam said, and she heard pride in his voice. "Not much, but it's mine. It's wonderful." Natalie meant it. There was something appealing about this place, the sense of a life built through honest work, beholden to no one. They dismounted, and Adam showed her around the property. The barn where he kept hay and equipment, the chicken coop, the root cellar dug deep to keep vegetables through the winter, the small bunkhouse where his 2 ranch hands lived, though both were away on their day off. Inside the house, everything was neat but sparse. A main room with a fireplace, kitchen area, and table, a single bedroom beyond, and a small room Adam used as an office. Men's quarters, clearly, lacking any feminine touch, but Natalie could see the potential. She caught herself imagining curtains at the windows, rugs on the floor, flowers on the table, and firmly pushed such thoughts away. They ate the dinner Adam had packed on the porch, watching the cattle graze while he pointed out landmarks, and told her stories about his first year's homesteading, the struggles and small triumphs. He spoke of brutal winters when he lost half his herd, summers so dry the grass turned brown, and gradually rebuilding until the ranch became profitable. His love for this land was evident in every word. "You ever miss Missouri?" she asked. "Sometimes. But that was my parents' life, not mine. Here, everything I built myself. That means something." He turned to her. "What about you? Do you miss Boston?" "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty. "I miss my students from the academy, perhaps, and the libraries, but the rest. The gossip and judgment and pretending to be something I wasn't. I don't miss that at all." "Who were you pretending to be?" The question caught her off guard. She looked out at the mountains, their peaks already white with early snow. Someone satisfied with a small, safe life. Someone who never wanted more than what was considered appropriate for a woman of my class. But the truth is, I always felt trapped, like there was something bigger waiting if I could just break free. And now I'm terrified half the time and exhilarated the other half. Teaching those children, learning to ride, living in this impossible, beautiful place. She laughed. "I have no idea what I'm doing, but at least it feels real. You're doing better than you think." Adam's voice had gone soft. "Those children adore you. I hear about Miss Richardson all over town. How you made arithmetic fun. How you broke up a fight between the Thompson boys without batting an eye. How you started a lending library with your own books. People talk about me." The idea made her uncomfortable, in the best way. "You've made a difference here, Natalie." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent warmth flooding through her. She met his eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Interest, admiration, and beneath it, desire carefully banked but unmistakable. Adam. His name felt right on her lips. "I should tell you something about why I left Boston. You don't owe me explanations. I want to tell you." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "There was a man, a professor at the academy. He courted me, said he wanted to marry me, and fool that I was, I believed him. We were never improper, but I let him kiss me, spent time alone with him. Then I discovered he already had a wife in New York. When I confronted him, he laughed. Said I was naive to think someone like him would actually marry a penniless teacher. Anger flashed across Adam's face. He sounds like a piece of work. The worst part was that everyone blamed me. Society decided I must have known, must have been trying to lure him away from his wife. My reputation was destroyed, and the academy asked me to leave. So when the position here came available, I took it. Fresh start, new life, all of that. She twisted her hands in her lap. I'm telling you because you've been so kind, and if we're going to be friends, you should know the truth about who I am. I know who you are, Adam said firmly. You're a woman with courage enough to come west alone, skill enough to teach a roomful of wild children, and heart enough to trust again after being hurt. That's all I need to know. Tears pricked at Natalie's eyes. You're a good man, Adam Yates. I'm a man who's been alone too long, he said quietly. And I'd like to court you properly if you'd allow it. I know I'm just a rancher without much polish and you're educated and refined, but I think we might suit each other. No pressure, no rush. Just honest intentions and time to see where this goes. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect herself from potential heartbreak. But a larger part, the part that had brought her west in the first place, wanted to take the risk. I'd like that very much, she said. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise over the mountains, and when he reached for her hand, she gave it willingly. They sat on his porch until the shadows grew long, talking about everything and nothing, hands linked between them, and Natalie felt something she had not experienced in a very long time: hope for the future. Their courtship unfolded slowly over the following weeks, shaped by the rhythms of their work and the watchful eyes of a small town. Adam continued the riding lessons, though Natalie now needed little instruction, and they became excuses to spend time together. They rode through the changing landscape as autumn deepened, exploring trails that wound through golden aspen groves and pine forests, always returning before full dark to preserve Natalie's reputation. On Sundays after church, they took dinner together at the restaurant or visited his ranch, and slowly the townspeople grew accustomed to seeing them as a pair. Natalie found herself thinking about Adam at odd moments during her teaching day, remembering something funny he had said or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He brought her wildflowers before they disappeared for winter, left fresh eggs from his chickens at the boarding house, and once, memorably, brought her a book of Tennyson's poetry he had ordered from Denver, because she had mentioned loving the poet. I'm not much for poetry myself, he admitted when she opened the package with delight, but I figured you might enjoy it during the long evenings. She had kissed his cheek impulsively, then blushed at her own boldness, but his expression of surprised pleasure made her glad she had dared. October brought the first serious snow, and with it, new challenges at the school. Several students stopped attending regularly, needed at home for harvest work, or kept away by deteriorating roads. Natalie worried about them losing ground in their studies, but Martha assured her this was normal for a mining town where family survival took precedence over education. Just do your best with the ones who show up, the older woman advised. Come spring, most will return. The weather also complicated her courtship with Adam. Heavy snows made the roads impassable for days at a time, and Natalie found herself anxiously watching the window for any sign of his arrival. When he finally appeared after a week-long storm, she nearly cried with relief. I was worried about you, she admitted as he stamped snow from his boots on the boarding house porch, where Mrs. Cooper had reluctantly allowed them to visit under her watchful supervision. Takes more than a little snow to keep me away. His eyes were warm on her face. I've been going crazy wondering how you were managing. Perfectly well, but I missed you. The admission felt risky, revealing too much of her growing feelings, but his answering smile made it worthwhile. They sat in Mrs. Cooper's parlor, careful to leave the door open and maintain proper distance, and talked for hours. Adam told her about the ranch, the difficulties of keeping cattle fed through heavy snows, his plans to expand the operation next year. Natalie shared stories about her students, the progress they were making, her hopes for starting a school play in the spring. Ordinary conversation, the kind any courting couple might have, but it felt precious to her, this growing intimacy of shared thoughts and dreams. "Natalie," Adam said as the evening drew to a close, "I need to ask you something." Her heart jumped. "Yes. Thanksgiving is coming, and I wondered if you'd spend it at the ranch. I know it's not entirely proper, but I promise I'll behave with perfect propriety. I just want to cook you dinner, show you I'm not completely hopeless in domestic matters." He looked nervous, this confident rancher suddenly uncertain. "I'd love that," she said softly. "Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible cook. Boston ladies aren't raised to be useful in kitchens." "Then maybe you should learn if you're planning to stay in Colorado." His tone was light, but his eyes held a question beneath the words. "I'm planning to stay," she assured him. "This is home now." The relief on his face told her volumes about his own worries, his concern that she might eventually tire of the rough Western life and return east. But she had meant what she said. Boston held nothing for her now. Her life was here, her students, her work, and increasingly this patient rancher who had taught her so much more than how to sit a horse. Thanksgiving arrived with clear skies and temperatures cold enough to freeze the water in the washbasin solid. Natalie dressed warmly in layers of wool and met Adam at the schoolhouse, where he had Rosie saddled and ready. The ride to his ranch took longer than usual, the horses picking their way carefully through snow-drifted trails, but Natalie had improved enough to handle the challenging conditions without anxiety. She trusted Rosie completely now, and more importantly, she trusted herself. At the ranch, Adam proved as good as his word, producing a respectable Thanksgiving dinner of roasted chicken, potatoes, and dried apple pie. They ate at his table while snow drifted against the windows, and Natalie felt a contentment she had never experienced in her parents' Boston mansion, for all its luxury and servants. "This is the best Thanksgiving I've ever had," she said honestly. "Even though you're stuck in a drafty ranch house instead of some fancy restaurant, especially because of that." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Adam, I want you to know how much these months have meant to me. You've given me confidence I never had before, shown me I can do things I thought impossible. You've been patient and kind, and never made me feel inadequate for my ignorance about Western life." He turned his hand to lace their fingers together, his palm warm and rough against hers. "You give me too much credit. You did all the hard work. We did it together." She hesitated, then decided to take the leap. "I'm falling in love with you. I don't know if it's too soon to say that, if I'm being too forward, but I can't keep pretending what I feel is simple friendship." For a moment, Adam just stared at her and fear clutched at her heart. Had she misread everything, pushed too fast, revealed too much? Then he stood, pulling her up with him, and cupped her face in his big, gentle hands. "I've loved you since the day you agreed to let me teach you to ride," he said roughly. This brave, stubborn Eastern woman who was terrified but climbed on that horse anyway, because she knew she needed to learn. "I've been trying to court you slow and proper, not rush you or make you think I wanted something you weren't ready to give. But Natalie, I love you. I want to marry you, build a life with you if you'll have me." "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened as she melted against him. This was nothing like the stolen kisses with Thomas, which had been all technique and no feeling. Adam kissed her like she was precious, like he wanted to memorize every detail, his arms coming around to hold her close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were bright with emotion. "I don't have a ring yet," he said. "I'll need to go to Denver, get you something proper." "I don't need a ring, I just need you. You'll get both," he promised. "Everything I have is yours now, the ranch, the cattle, my sorry self, all of it." She laughed, giddy with happiness. "When should we marry? Tomorrow, if it were up to me. But I suppose we should do things right. After Christmas, maybe. Give people time to get used to the idea, and you time to finish the school term if you want. I'll need to talk to Martha about finding a replacement teacher. You don't have to quit teaching unless you want to. I know it's important to you." She pulled back to look at him properly. "You'd be all right with a wife who works. I'd be honored to have a wife who's the smartest, most capable woman in Aspen." He kissed her forehead. "We'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Figuring things out together." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. Practical discussions mixed with kisses and long moments of simply holding each other, marveling at this new understanding between them. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Adam insisted on riding back to town with her, unwilling to let her make the journey alone even though she was perfectly capable now. "Humor me," he said. "I'm going to be protective. It's who I am." "I can live with that," she teased, "as long as you remember I'm not helpless. Trust me, I'm very aware you're not helpless. You're fierce, Natalie Richardson. It's one of the things I love most about you." They announced their engagement the following Sunday at church, and if some of the townspeople were surprised by the speed of the courtship, most seemed genuinely pleased. Martha hugged Natalie enthusiastically, declaring she had suspected this outcome all along. Mrs. Cooper sniffed and said she hoped Miss Richardson knew what she was getting into, becoming a rancher's wife, but even she seemed approving underneath the bluster. The students bombarded Natalie with questions, wanting to know if she would keep teaching after marriage, and she assured them she had every intention of finishing the school year. True to his word, Adam traveled to Denver in early December and returned with a simple gold band set with a small diamond, which he presented to Natalie over dinner at the restaurant. She loved it immediately, this modest ring that represented so much more than the flashy jewelry Thomas had promised but never delivered. This was real, earned through honest work, given with true love. They set the wedding date for December 28th, allowing time for Adam's sister and her family to make the trip from Denver despite winter conditions. Natalie wrote to her parents, feeling obligated to inform them though she expected no response. To her surprise, her mother sent a brief letter congratulating her and enclosing a check for $50, the equivalent of a white flag if not quite an apology. Natalie used the money to purchase fabric for a wedding dress, which she and Martha sewed together in the evenings, pale blue silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Natalie continued teaching, though her mind often wandered to thoughts of her upcoming marriage, life at the ranch, the future unfolding before her. Adam visited daily when weather permitted, and they spent their evenings planning, discussing everything from where they would sleep to how they would manage the ranch together. He valued her opinions, sought her input on decisions, treated her as an equal partner in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "I want you to be happy at the ranch," he said one evening as they sat in Mrs. Cooper's parlor. "If you need changes made to the house, things that would make it more comfortable, just say so. It's your home now, too." "Our home," she corrected gently. And I'm sure I'll have ideas once I'm living there, but honestly, Adam, I'm not marrying you for a fancy house. I'm marrying you because you're the best man I've ever known." His ears went red with pleased embarrassment. "I'll do my best to deserve you. You already do." December 28th dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow sparkling under brilliant sunshine. The wedding took place in the church at noon, with half the town in attendance and the circuit preacher officiating. Natalie wore her blue silk dress and carried a small bouquet of preserved flowers, since nothing bloomed in December. Adam stood at the front of the church in a new suit, looking handsome and nervous, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, traditional vows promising to love and honor until death. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Adam kissed her, Natalie felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. This was real. She was married to this good, patient man who had taught her so much more than how to ride a horse. He had taught her to trust again, to risk her heart, to believe in new beginnings. The reception afterward featured food provided by half the town, everyone contributing what they could. There was music from a fiddle player and dancing. Though Natalie had never learned Western dancing and spent most of the time laughing as Adam tried to teach her the steps. His sister Jane proved to be warm and welcoming, embracing Natalie as family and extracting promises that they would visit Denver in the spring. Her two sons, aged 10 and 12, were fascinated by their new aunt and peppered her with questions about teaching in Boston, until Jane finally shushed them. As evening fell, Adam bundled Natalie into a sleigh he had borrowed for the occasion, and they drove through the snowy darkness to his ranch under a sky full of stars. Someone had been there ahead of them, probably Jane or Martha, because the house was warm, a fire burning in the fireplace and lamps lit throughout. Natalie noticed other small touches: flowers in a vase on the table, fresh linens on the bed, food laid out in the kitchen. "Our friends have been busy," Adam said, helping her out of her cloak. "It's perfect." She turned to face him, suddenly shy despite all their weeks of courtship. This was the moment everything changed, when they truly became husband and wife. He seemed to understand her nervousness. "We don't have to rush anything. I can sleep in the office if you'd prefer, give you time to adjust." "No." She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. "I want this. I want you. I'm just a little nervous." "Me too," he admitted. "I want to make you happy, Natalie, in every way." She reached up to kiss him, and he responded carefully at first, then with growing passion as she pressed against him. They made their way to the bedroom, helping each other out of their wedding clothes with fumbling fingers and breathless laughter. Adam was achingly gentle with her, patient and attentive, making sure of her comfort and pleasure before seeking his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." She fell asleep feeling safe and cherished, her last thought before dreams claimed her that this, finally, was where she belonged. Their first months of marriage brought adjustments as they learned to live together, to navigate the small compromises and negotiations of shared life. Natalie discovered that Adam was tidier than expected, but had peculiar ideas about how things should be organized. And he learned that she was not a morning person, and required coffee before she could manage civil conversation. They worked out a division of household labor that played to their strengths, with Adam handling most of the cooking since he was genuinely better at it, while Natalie took over the household accounts and correspondence. She continued teaching through the end of the school year, riding Rosie into town each morning and returning in the afternoon, a routine that quickly became comfortable. Adam's ranch hands, Ben and Charlie, had been initially skeptical of their boss marrying a city woman. But Natalie won them over by taking genuine interest in the ranch operations and proving she was willing to learn. She spent her weekends helping with various tasks around the property, discovering she had a knack for handling the chickens, and enjoyed the simple satisfaction of collecting eggs each morning. Spring arrived with its usual mountain drama, snow melting in rushing torrents that swelled the river, wildflowers carpeting the meadows overnight. Natalie and Adam took long rides through the awakening landscape, sometimes packing dinner and staying out until dusk, talking about everything and nothing. She had never been so happy, so certain she had made the right choice. In April, she began to suspect she might be pregnant. The signs were subtle at first but grew more definite: morning nausea, unusual fatigue, her monthly courses absent. She waited to tell Adam until she was certain, then chose a Saturday evening when they were alone at the ranch, the hands having gone into town. "Adam, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the harness he was mending, concern flashing across his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right." She smiled, nervous excitement fluttering in her chest. "I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, the harness forgotten in his hands. Then he was across the room, sweeping her up into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got sick. "A baby," he breathed, setting her down carefully as though she might break. "Natalie, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But yes, I'm sure." His hand came to rest on her still flat stomach, wonder written across his features. "We're going to be parents. Are you happy about it?" "I know we never really discuss children and it's happening rather quickly." "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He pulled her close, kissing her thoroughly. "I'm over the moon, terrified but over the moon." She laughed against his lips. "I'm terrified too." "I don't know the first thing about babies." "Then we'll learn together, like everything else." Natalie finished the school year in May, her pregnancy still barely noticeable but her energy flagging enough that she was grateful for the break. She and Adam traveled to Denver to visit Jane, telling her the news, and his sister was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt. Jane provided much-needed advice about pregnancy and childbirth, information Natalie absorbed gratefully. Her own mother had never discussed such matters, considering them indelicate. Summer passed in a haze of heat and growing contentment as Natalie's belly swelled with their child. She spent her days helping around the ranch as much as Adam would allow, though he became increasingly protective as her due date approached. They had engaged a midwife in Aspen, an experienced woman named Mrs. Fletcher, who visited monthly to check on Natalie's progress and assure them everything looked normal. "First babies take their time," Mrs. Fletcher said during her August visit. "Don't expect anything before late September at the earliest." But the baby had other ideas. On September 15th, 3 weeks earlier than expected, Natalie woke in the early morning hours with cramping pains that grew steadily worse. She shook Adam awake, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "I think the baby's coming." He bolted upright, instantly alert. "Now, are you sure?" "The pains are getting closer together." "Yes, I'm sure." What followed was organized chaos as Adam sent Charlie racing into town to fetch Mrs. Fletcher while he helped Natalie through increasingly intense contractions. She had never experienced pain like this, wave after wave that seemed to split her apart, and she clung to Adam's hand while trying not to scream. He stayed with her despite Mrs. Fletcher's attempts to shoo him from the room, refusing to leave his wife's side. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "She needs me here." The labor lasted through the morning and into the afternoon. Hours of pain that blurred together until Natalie thought she could not endure another moment. Then, finally, Mrs. Fletcher announced it was time to push, and with Adam supporting her and whispering encouragement, she bore down with the last of her strength. The baby slid free in a rush, and moments later, a piercing cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Mrs. Fletcher announced, holding up the squalling infant. A healthy boy, by the sound of those lungs. Tears streamed down Natalie's face as the midwife placed her son on her chest. This tiny, perfect creature she and Adam had created. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was red-faced from crying. But when Adam reached out to touch his head with one gentle finger, the infant quieted, as though recognizing his father's touch. "He's beautiful," Adam said hoarsely, tears in his own eyes. "You're both beautiful." "Natalie, you were so brave. We have a son." She could hardly believe it, this miracle in her arms. They named him Thomas Andrew, though Natalie insisted everyone call him Drew to avoid any association with her unfortunate past. He was a good baby overall, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well, though the adjustment to parenthood exhausted them both. Natalie marveled at Adam's patience with their son, the way he could calm Drew's crying when she was at her wit's end, how he insisted on taking night feedings when he could to let her rest. "You're a natural father," she told him one night, watching him rock Drew back to sleep. "I'm making it up as I go, same as you." But he looked pleased by the compliment. As winter set in again, they settled into new rhythms as a family of three. Natalie found she did not miss teaching as much as she had expected, too absorbed in caring for Drew to think about much else. The townspeople visited with gifts and congratulations, Martha bringing a beautiful quilt she had sewn, Mrs. Cooper producing a set of tiny knitted booties. Even Natalie's students or former students stopped by to see the baby and ask when Miss Richardson, or rather Mrs. Yates, might return to teaching. "Maybe in a year or two," Natalie told them, "when Drew is older." But privately, she was not certain she wanted to return. Her life had changed so completely from the prim Boston schoolteacher who had arrived in Aspen 2 years ago. That woman would hardly recognize the person she had become. Rancher's wife, mother, capable of riding through mountains and handling livestock and weathering the hardships of frontier life. She was stronger now, more confident, more herself than she had ever been in the carefully controlled world of her childhood. "Are you happy?" Adam asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Drew asleep in his cradle between them. "Deliriously so," she said honestly. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is real, that I get to have you and Drew and this life. I'm the lucky one." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together in the gesture that had become second nature. "You took a chance on a rough rancher who barely knew which fork to use at dinner. You taught me to ride. I'd say we're even." He smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip. "I suppose I did. Best decision I ever made, bringing Rosie to that schoolhouse. Best decision I ever made, saying yes." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the hearth, their son sleeping peacefully nearby. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the ranch in fresh whiteness, but inside they were warm and safe and together. Natalie thought about the terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Aspen, running from scandal and heartbreak, certain her life was over. She wished she could tell that woman what waited ahead. The patient rancher who would teach her so much more than riding, the love that would heal her wounded heart, the family she would build in this wild, beautiful place. The years that followed brought their share of joys and challenges. A second child arrived in the spring of 1881, a daughter they named Caroline, who inherited her mother's dark hair and her father's honey-colored eyes. She was a more demanding infant than Drew had been, colicky and wakeful. But Adam walked miles around the ranch house at night, singing to her in his deep voice until she finally settled. Drew proved to be a serious, thoughtful child who adored his baby sister and could often be found sitting beside her cradle, telling her stories about the ranch and the horses. The ranch itself prospered under Adam's steady management, growing from a marginal operation to one of the most successful in the valley. He expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and built additional outbuildings as the operation required. Natalie's contributions were less visible, but no less important. She managed the household accounts with careful precision, handled correspondence with buyers and suppliers, and kept the domestic side of ranch life running smoothly. In 1883, tragedy struck when a late spring blizzard caught Adam and Ben out on the range with the herd. They made it back safely, but several cattle were lost, and Adam came down with pneumonia that nearly killed him. Natalie nursed him through weeks of fever and delirium, terrified she would lose him, while Jane came from Denver to help with the children. When he finally turned the corner and began to recover, she broke down crying in relief, and he held her with his remaining strength, promising he was not going anywhere. "You're stuck with me for the long haul," he whispered. "I'm too stubborn to die young." "You better be," she said fiercely. "These children need their father, and I need you more than breath." His recovery took months, but by summer he was back on horseback, though he moved more carefully and tired more easily than before. The experience had sobered them both, a reminder of how fragile life could be on the frontier. They talked seriously about the future, about building something that would last beyond their lifetimes. "I want Drew to have this ranch someday," Adam said. "And Caroline too, if she wants it. I want them to know their parents built something solid, something worth keeping." "Then we'll make sure of it," Natalie promised. In 1884, Aspen voted to hire a permanent school teacher to replace the series of short-term instructors who had cycled through since Natalie left. The town council approached her about returning, and after discussing it with Adam, she agreed to teach part-time, 3 days a week, while a younger woman handled the other 2 days and lived in the teacherage. The arrangement allowed her to balance family responsibilities with the teaching she had missed, and she found deep satisfaction in returning to work she loved. Her students ranged from children she had taught before, now older and more capable, to a new generation of youngsters. Some were the sons and daughters of miners who had struck it rich, others the children of struggling families barely scraping by. She treated them all equally, seeing potential in each one, pushing them to learn and grow. Several of her former students had gone on to attend school in Denver or beyond, and she took fierce pride in their accomplishments. Caroline proved to be a different child than her brother, fearless where Drew was cautious, always into mischief and pushing boundaries. She took to riding almost before she could walk, scrambling onto Rosie's back at every opportunity, and Adam laughingly predicted she would be running the ranch by the time she was 10. Drew, meanwhile, showed an unexpected talent for numbers and bookkeeping, helping his mother with accounts and demonstrating a head for business that would serve him well. In 1886, another daughter joined the family, Lucy, who was placid and cheerful from the start, seeming to take life as it came without the intensity of her siblings. By then, Natalie and Adam had the parenting routine down to a science, and Lucy's infancy passed in a blur of sleepless nights and sweet baby smiles that made it all worthwhile. The ranch had become a true family operation by this point, with even young Drew helping with chores appropriate to his age, collecting eggs, feeding chickens, learning to groom horses under his father's patient instruction. Caroline shadowed Adam everywhere, begging to help with the cattle despite being barely tall enough to see over the corral fence. Lucy was too young yet for chores, but she toddled after her siblings, determined to be included in whatever they were doing. Natalie often found herself standing on the porch at sunset, watching her children play in the yard while Adam worked nearby, and feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. This was so far from anything she had imagined growing up in Boston, and yet it fit her perfectly, like a garment tailored specifically to her measurements. "What are you thinking about?" Adam asked one evening, coming to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "How lucky we are. How different my life might have been if I hadn't come west, if you hadn't offered to teach me to ride." "I'd say it was fate," he said. "You were always meant to be here, Natalie, with me, with our children in this place. I knew it the moment you climbed on Rosie for the first time, terrified but determined. I knew you were the one. I fought falling in love with you," she admitted. "I was so afraid of being hurt again. I know. I could see it in your eyes, that fear, but you trusted me anyway, took the risk. That was the bravest thing you ever did." She turned in his arms to face him, this man who had taught her so much over the years. How to ride, how to trust, how to love without holding back. His face was more weathered now, lines carved deeper by sun and wind and the challenges of ranching life, but to her he was more handsome than ever. "I love you," she said simply. "More now than the day we married." "That's good," he said with a smile. "Because I intend to keep you for another 40 or 50 years at least. I can live with that." He kissed her as the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the same colors as those first riding lessons so many years ago. Their children's laughter rang out from the yard, mixed with the lowing of cattle and the evening songs of birds settling for the night. This was their life, hard-won and precious, built on patience and love, and the simple daily choice to keep choosing each other. In 1890, Natalie received an unexpected letter from her mother, the first direct communication in years beyond brief notes accompanying Christmas gifts for the children. Her father had died, and her mother was selling the Boston house, preparing to move to a smaller residence. The letter was not precisely an apology, but it came close, acknowledging that perhaps she had been too harsh in her judgment, that Natalie seemed to have built a good life despite the scandal. Would Natalie consider allowing her mother to visit and meet her grandchildren? Natalie showed the letter to Adam, uncertain how to respond. "What do you think?" "I think that's your decision," he said carefully. "But those children should know their grandmother if she's genuinely interested in having a relationship. People deserve second chances." So Natalie wrote back, extending an invitation, and in August of that year, her mother arrived in Aspen for a month-long visit. Alina Richardson was smaller than Natalie remembered, more fragile, the years having worn away some of her rigid certainty. She was awkward with the children at first, unused to the noise and energy of a ranch household, but Drew's gentle manners won her over, and Caroline's fearless affection broke through her reserve. By the time she left, genuine tears were shed on both sides, and Alina promised to return the following summer. "Your mother's not so bad once you get past the ice," Adam observed after Alina's departure. "She's changed. Or maybe I have. Probably both." Natalie leaned against him, watching the stage carry her mother away. "Thank you for being kind to her. I know she can be difficult. She raised you, so she can't be all bad." The 1890s brought continued growth and change to both their family and Aspen itself. The silver boom that had fueled the town's explosive growth began to slow, with some mines playing out and others proving less profitable than hoped. Many families left seeking opportunities elsewhere, and the town's population declined from its peak. But the Yates Ranch remained steady, diversifying beyond cattle to include horses, which proved increasingly profitable as the demand for good mounts remained strong. Drew, now a teenager, showed every sign of becoming an excellent rancher, combining his father's patient competence with his mother's head for business. He spent hours working alongside Adam, learning every aspect of the operation, and began making suggestions for improvements that showed real insight. Caroline, true to Adam's prediction, was a natural with horses, gentling and training them with an instinctive understanding that even experienced hands marveled at. Lucy remained the family peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts between her more intense siblings and keeping everyone laughing with her gentle humor. In 1895, another addition arrived somewhat unexpectedly, twin boys that Natalie and Adam named James and Robert. The pregnancy had been difficult, the birth even more so, and afterward the doctor gently suggested this should probably be their last children. At 40, Natalie was inclined to agree, feeling she had enough on her hands with 5 youngsters ranging from toddler twins to 16-year-old Drew. "Our quiver is officially full," Adam joked, looking slightly overwhelmed as he held a twin in each arm. "More than full," Natalie agreed, but she could not regret these last additions, watching the older children cluster around to meet their new brothers. The turn of the century found the Yates family firmly established as one of the pillars of the Aspen community. Adam served on the town council, Natalie continued her part-time teaching, and their children were growing into capable, responsible young people. Drew was already taking on more ranch responsibilities as Adam began to slow down, not from any illness but simply the natural effect of years of hard physical labor. Caroline had married a neighboring rancher's son in 1899, a young man Adam approved of, and was expecting their first grandchild. Lucy showed signs of following her mother into teaching, spending her free time helping at the school. On their 20th wedding anniversary in December 1898, Adam and Natalie stood on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage whenever possible. The mountains were white with snow, the air crisp and clean, the ranch spread out before them, solid and prospering. 20 years, Natalie said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday and sometimes like forever. The best forever I could have imagined. Adam pulled her close against the cold. No regrets, not a single one. You. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. He kissed the top of her head. But I'll take the years we have and be grateful. Do you remember those first riding lessons, how terrified I was? I remember thinking you were the bravest person I'd ever met. Still think that, actually. You faced every challenge this life has thrown at you with courage and grace. She laughed. I don't know about grace, but I've tried my best. More than tried. You've succeeded beyond measure. Those children in there, this ranch, the life we've built, all of it is as much your doing as mine. More, probably. No, she said firmly. We did it together. That's what makes it work. They stood in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear, brilliant against the black sky. Inside, they could hear their children, the twins squabbling over a toy while Lucy refereed and Drew worked on homework at the kitchen table. Normal family chaos, the sound of home. Come on, Adam said finally. Let's go inside before we freeze. I promised the boys I'd tell them a story before bed. Hand in hand, they walked into the warmth of their home, into the life they had created together through patience, love, and the simple daily choice to honor their commitment. The woman who had once said, I cannot ride, had learned to do far more than sit a horse. She had learned to build a life on her own terms, to trust and be trusted, to love with her whole heart. And the patient rancher who had taught her gently every sunset had given her far more than riding lessons. He had given her a home, a family, and a love that had grown stronger with each passing year. In 1902, their first grandchild arrived, Caroline's son, another Adam to carry on the family name. Natalie held the baby and marveled at becoming a grandmother at 47, feeling simultaneously old and ageless. She watched her daughter with her infant, seeing echoes of herself 2 decades earlier, and knew the cycle was continuing, the family they had built extending into another generation. Drew married in 1903, bringing home a practical young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into ranch life. They took over the main house, with Adam and Natalie moving into a new, smaller house they built nearby, giving the young couple space to start their own family while remaining close enough to help as needed. It was the right transition, passing the active management of the ranch to the next generation while Adam and Natalie stepped into advisory roles. "How does it feel?" Natalie asked Adam after they had settled into their new home. "Handing over the ranch you built. Bittersweet," he admitted. "But right. Drew's ready, more than ready. And I'm ready to slow down, spend more time with you, spoil grandchildren." He grinned. "Maybe take some of those trips you've always talked about. Denver, San Francisco, places we never had time to visit." They did travel more in those years, taking advantage of improved railroad connections to see parts of the country neither had experienced. But they always returned to Aspen with relief, confirmed in their belief that nowhere else compared to the mountains they called home. Their family continued to expand as Lucy married a teacher from Denver and moved to the city, though she visited regularly. The twins grew into strapping young men who eventually left to seek their fortunes elsewhere, James joining the Army and Robert trying his luck in the California gold fields. In 1910, Adam began having health problems, a persistent cough that would not resolve and growing weakness that worried Natalie deeply. The doctor diagnosed a serious heart condition, the result of years of hard labor and that long-ago bout of pneumonia. There was little to be done except rest and take things easy, advice Adam followed grudgingly. "I'm not ready to be an invalid," he grumbled. "Then don't be," Natalie said practically. "But you need to be sensible. Let Drew handle the heavy work. You can still manage plenty from a chair on the porch." He did slow down, though it grated against his nature to watch others do work he had always handled himself. But he found satisfaction in teaching his grandchildren, now numerous enough to require a head count, passing on skills and stories and the values that had guided his own life. His pride in Drew's management of the ranch was obvious, and father and son remained close, consulting daily on decisions large and small. Natalie continued teaching into her 60s, finally retiring in 1913 when it became clear Adam needed more of her time and attention. She had taught 3 generations of Aspen children by then, and the school board named the building after her when a new schoolhouse was constructed, the Richardson School, a testament to her decades of service. She was embarrassed by the honor but deeply touched. "You've earned it," Adam said firmly. "You've shaped this town as much as any miner or businessman, more because you shaped the children." They settled into a quiet routine in their later years, reading together by the fire, taking short walks when Adam felt strong enough, receiving visits from their ever-expanding family. Caroline had 4 children now, Drew 3, Lucy 2, and even the twins had started families in their distant locations. Grandchildren came to stay for weeks at a time during summers, and the old ranch house echoed with young voices again. On their 40th wedding anniversary in December 1918, the family gathered for a celebration. children and grandchildren crowding into Drew's house for dinner and reminiscences. Natalie looked around the table at the faces assembled there, all these people who existed because she and Adam had taken a chance on love, and felt her heart might burst with happiness. "Speech," Caroline called, and others took up the cry. Adam struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane, and Natalie rose to stand beside him, her hand on his arm for support. He cleared his throat, emotional despite his attempts at composure. "40 years ago, I married the bravest woman I've ever known," he began. "She came west alone, took a chance on a rough rancher who barely knew his manners and built this family with me. Everything good in my life traces back to her, to that day she agreed to let me teach her to ride." His voice roughened with feeling. "Natalie, you've been my partner, my love, my best friend. The greatest adventure of my life has been sharing it with you." Tears streamed down Natalie's face as she reached up to kiss him, not caring that they had an audience. "The greatest adventure of mine," she whispered against his lips. The family erupted in applause and cheers, and the celebration continued late into the evening, filled with laughter and music, and the warmth of love shared across generations. When they finally returned to their small house, exhausted but happy, Adam sank into his chair with a sigh of relief. "That was wonderful, but I'm done in," he admitted. Natalie helped him prepare for bed, a role she had increasingly taken on as his health declined. Once he was settled, she lay beside him, her head on his shoulder in their familiar position. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Not traveling more when we were young, not taking time for adventure." "Every day with you has been an adventure," he said, "and I have no regrets, not one." "Neither do I. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. We gave it to each other." Adam died in his sleep in March of 1920, his heart finally giving out after months of decline. Natalie woke to find him cold beside her, gone so peacefully she had not even stirred. The grief was crushing, a physical weight on her chest that made breathing difficult. 41 years of marriage, of partnership, of love, and suddenly she was alone. The family rallied around her, everyone returning for the funeral. The church overflowed with mourners, testimony to the respect Adam had earned in his years in Aspen. Natalie sat in the front pew, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and listened to stories about her husband's kindness, his integrity, his skill as a rancher and friend. She knew all of it was true, but it barely scratched the surface of who he had been to her. The months after Adam's death were the darkest of Natalie's life. She moved through each day mechanically, going through motions, but feeling nothing except the enormous absence where her husband had been. Drew and Sarah tried to convince her to move in with them, but she refused, needing space to grieve, to adjust to this new reality of widowhood. Slowly, gradually, the sharp edge of grief dulled to something more bearable. She began to re-engage with life, spending time with grandchildren, helping where she could with the ranch, even returning to occasional substitute teaching when the school needed her. She organized Adam's papers and mementos, creating a written history of the ranch for future generations. She wrote letters to all their children, telling them stories of their father, ensuring his memory stayed vivid. One evening in late summer, she rode Rosie's descendant, a gentle mare named Ruby, up to the plateau where the ranch house stood. Now 75 and slowed by arthritis, Natalie still rode when she could, unwilling to give up the skill Adam had taught her so patiently all those years ago. She dismounted at their old spot, where they had shared that first Thanksgiving dinner and so many meals since, and stood looking out over the land they had built together. "I miss you," she said aloud, speaking to the wind and mountains and the memory of the man she loved. "Every day, every moment." But I'm grateful, Adam, for every sunset, every riding lesson, every year we had. You taught me so much more than how to sit a horse. You taught me how to live. A gust of wind stirred her hair, and for just a moment she could have sworn she felt his presence, warm and solid beside her. Then it passed, leaving only the clean mountain air and the setting sun painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and orange. Natalie lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1932 at the age of 87. She spent those years surrounded by family, watching her grandchildren grow and marry and produce great-grandchildren she delighted in. She wrote her memoirs, detailing the journey from Boston to Colorado, from terrified teacher to confident rancher's wife. She was there to see the ranch celebrate its 60th anniversary, now one of the oldest continuously operated family ranches in the valley. At her funeral, Drew spoke of his mother's courage and determination, the way she had adapted to frontier life without losing her essential kindness and grace. Caroline told stories of her mother's patience and wisdom, the lessons she had taught not just in the classroom but through her example. Lucy read from Natalie's memoirs, passages about learning to ride and falling in love, bringing laughter and tears from the assembled crowd. They buried her beside Adam on the hill above the ranch, where they could look out eternally over the land they had built together. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription: Natalie Richardson Yates, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. She learned to ride. The ranch continued under Drew's management, then passed to his son, and then to his son after that, remaining in the family for generations. The story of Adam and Natalie became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The patient rancher who had taught the Eastern school teacher to ride, the love that had grown from those sunset lessons, the life they had built together in the wild mountains of Colorado. Their house was preserved as part of the ranch compound, and their great-great-grandchildren played in rooms where they had raised their own family, walked floors they had walked, looked out windows at views they had loved. In the end, it was exactly the story Natalie had written to her mother in one of those later letters, explaining her life and choices. I came west running from scandal and heartbreak, expecting nothing. Instead, I found everything: purpose, family, and a love that transformed me completely. Adam taught me to ride, but more importantly, he taught me to trust myself, to take risks, to embrace life fully rather than merely enduring it. He gave me 41 years of partnership, 5 children, countless grandchildren, and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. If I could go back and choose differently, I wouldn't change a single moment. Every sunset, every lesson, every year was a gift. I am who I was always meant to be, and I found exactly where I was supposed to belong. The mountains still stand over Aspen, their peaks white with eternal snow, and if you visit in the evening when the sun sinks toward the western horizon, painting everything gold and orange, you might feel an echo of those long-ago riding lessons. A patient rancher teaching a determined woman to ride, both of them learning something far more important than horsemanship, both of them building something that would outlast them both. A love story written in sunset light, preserved in family memory, and testified to by generations of descendants who carry forward the legacy of courage, patience, and enduring love.